You are listening to Radical Sacred, a podcast centered around spirituality, nature, and connection.
I'm Phil Dickey, pastor, eco-spiritualist, activist, friend of trees, and a small-town Missourian living in the heart of Dallas.
And I'm Jenny Mislin, spiritual director, teacher, seeker, bird watcher, and a homesick Texan living in France.
Join us now as we live the questions, learn from open-hearted conversations, and explore our own deep and sacred roots.
Appalachian Elegy number 57 by Bell Hooks. Fierce grief shadows me. I hold to the memory of ongoing loss. Land stolen, bodies shamed, everywhere the stench of death and retribution all around me. Nature demands amends. Spirit guides me to take back the land. Make amends. Silence the cries of the lost, the lamentations. Let them sleep forever sublime, knowing that we have made a place that can sustain us, a place of certainty and sanctuary. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Nature demands amends. Friends, welcome to Radical Sacred. Today we have Reverend Dr. Shively Smith with us. Shively serves as the Associate Professor of New Testament at Boston University School of Theology in Boston, Massachusetts. She completed her PhD in New Testament Studies at Emory University. She has written prolifically, especially about Peter, which we're going to talk about Peter, why you went down the path of Peter. I got the privilege to meet Shively last fall when I was with my Fidgetal Fellowship group, which we love the Fidgetal Fellows.
We love them.
Love them. We spent lots of time with Boston University folks, and I got to see you moderate a panel at the Howard Thurman Center, which was absolutely amazing. We got to learn immense, wonderful things about Howard Thurman. And then you came and talked to us about dreams as well, which was so fascinating. So I'm really excited about this conversation because there's so many directions that it could go and may potentially go. And I'm going to try to really stay focused. And the reality is we just know we're going to have you back on for a second episode anyway. We'll get to that at the end. But I'll just say, Shively, we are so grateful that you are joining us today and would love for you to introduce yourself in any way that you would like to, in addition to, all the academic and professional things.
Yeah, I am Shively Smith, and in addition to being a biblical scholar, a Howard Thurman scholar, my facts are I'm a mom. I'm a girl mom. I had not planned on being a girl mom. I thought I was destined to be a boy mom, and then I ended up with two girls. And so one of my fun facts is I'm a girl mom, and that was not what I initially imagined for my life. I am a scholar, preacher, all those things, who actually loves playing video games. So I am a hardcore video gamer. And I love the water. So when I am most unmoored, most unsettled, or in a seeking space, it is water that helps me to hear. It is water that helps me to see. It is water that helps me to reroute. And sometimes that water, so here's a funny thing. Sometimes that water may just have to be the shower, but it is water nonetheless. So that's a different take on Reverend Dr. Shively Smith. Is that helpful?
Oh, that's amazing. And we will come back to water because water is going to tie it. We talk so much about nature and the natural world, and so we will. I got to start though with video games. That was not on my assumption here for you.
It typically is not,
which I love. One of our Fidgetal Fellows, Nathan Webb, we had on the podcast because our whole last season was all on pilgrimage, and he listened to it and ended up doing a pilgrimage in a video game. So he had gamers with him, and they did pilgrimage through video games, which was
what video games do we know?
He's done I think 4 or 5 of them now.
Oh my gosh.
Nevin, I think it was. I had to go back and find the list of them, but yeah, he's done a variety of them, and that's something they continue to do as their Checkpoint Church community is do pilgrimage via video games. But what kind of games are you playing? Like, what's your?
Yeah, so I was the kid of what my brother and I were very, very close, and we would play video games when he was sick. He was a teenager who had cancer and then passed at that. We were both teenagers together. So my initial induction into video games was playing with my brother, who's almost exactly 2 years apart from me. So we played all the old school things. So might be dating myself, but we were playing Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter. Then they brought Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter together, and so we were doing Mortal Kombat with each other in that way. But now I came back to video games, particularly in my graduate studies, as a way to make my brain do something else. So, you can be reading all this biblical studies, ancient history. I was also doing a lot of modern history and American history, and and then languages. So, right. So I was literally sleeping, talking in Greek, according to so like, you're talking in Greek, right? And how do we get your brain to do something else? And we were like, well, let's try video games. So I started doing video games, not as a way to disconnect, not to connect. And so now I love open world. Get it. Open world apocalyptic video games are the best for me. So Fallout, Skyrim, I love Bethesda Studios. And then I've really gotten into the new Assassin's Creed. And then Ghost of Yotel is one that I've been playing over the break that I'm really loving. So yeah, there may be more information than you need, but
Love it.
love video games and the open world where I can do what I want to do. I can go and explore pilgrimage. Can go on whatever pilgrimage I want to go on, and recreate. It helps really it also helps me think creatively. Yeah. So that's my fun place. So the trick is I have to tell my youngest daughter she is not allowed to play my open world game. So she has to start her own avatar because she wants to sometimes piggyback off of the game that I have started. And I'm like, no, my world is just as I like it.
Don't mess up my world.
Don't mess up my world. Don't mess up my avatar. Your own.
Oh, I love that. How long has water been the place where you go to? Has it always been that? Has it been something that's evolved over time? Talk to us about the water. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so appropriate, Jenny, that you read from Bell Hooks because I too am from Kentucky. So we lived near a river, and so my mother would take my brother and myself to sit there sometimes just to talk through things, to resituate ourselves, and just to be. And that kind of started when I was a teenager, so around 13 and 14. And so it really became a space for the three of us to hear each other and to recenter and to kind of vision together what was next. And I didn't know then how that is so significant for my own spiritual life, and what Thurman would call my living fact is what it means to sit by water, stand by water, and to be entirely unveiled, right? To be by water and just to say and to be in water and just to say this is what I have today. The other fun part about that is related to that. I didn't know how to swim when I was a teenager. My mother is deathly afraid of water. And so she decided that I was not going to inherit her fear. So she signed me up for swim lessons. as a teenager, and I don't think I was a whole month into swim lessons. And then the next thing you know, and I was enjoying them tremendously. And then the next thing you know, she signed me up for the swim team, for a swim team, or for the swim team. It's like, I don't even know how to. So next thing you know, I'm in swim lessons and on the swim team, having to swim. I did. I was racing, doing the medley, and just really took to water in that way. And it was the same thing for me. The relay and swimming was more about being in the water and taking it in and on however way I was showing up that day. Was less about winning. Now I did win a few competitions, but at the end of the day, I wasn't in the water to win the competition. I was in the water to be in the water that day. And to see what we were going to do together. So I would talk to the water, like, okay, what are we doing today? Some of my teammates would think that was weird. It probably was, in a Thurman-esque kind of way. Feel like Thurman talking to trees, Shively talking to the water before she gets in. There's some similarities there. And so, yeah, that was kind of my water journey.
You mentioned Thurman a few times here. We've talked about Howard Thurman some on the podcast recently, just because honestly, a lot of us stem back from the time that I spent in Boston back in the fall, and how just profound that was, and just so meaningful to me. It just continues to be a thread that we go back to over and over again. Would love to hear what drew you to Thurman originally, and why you continue to go back.
Yeah, what originally drew me to Thurman was my brother's death. So my brother died of cancer at the age of 15, and I was just turning 17. And our birthdays are 2 days apart. So my earliest birthdays even are shared with my brother, and we were very, very close. Um, and so at his death, how does a teenager, a kid, process, the death of their sibling in this kind of way, where you watched it happen, right? And there's nothing anyone could do. I sort of shut down. And someone, this is the interesting piece. I do not know to this day who that someone was. It was clearly someone that was journeying with us. So either a chaplain or minister, someone put in my hands Thurman's Meditations of the Heart, because everyone knew I was a reader, and deeply contemplative in my own way. And I read that. I started reading, almost opened up to the page, his meditation that's called The Threads in My Hand. And in that meditation, he starts talking about all the ways in which there are other people on the end of these threads. And the one he says, in my hands is a thread, and on the other end is an old, old friend. Hardly aware am I when the tight line slackens and there's nothing, nothing at all. And that line broke me. Like, I started crying and wailing. It was like the first time in months where you had gotten any emotion from me, right? Or that I had been able to give any emotion. And that was the beginning of Thurman and I. So it's interesting in that I came to Thurman not as an intellectual or a theologian or a scholar. I didn't read his Jesus and the Disinherited. I didn't even know about that until years and years later. Thurman, for me, was a poet, a spiritual poet, a writer, someone that knew how to scribe contemplative space, to do the hard work of living, to give it words and images that I could see and live with and articulate. So it was actually quite strange for me when I came to seminary. Everybody was talking about him as a theologian, and it was quite weird. I was like, what? So, because I didn't know Thurman that way.
Yeah, he's just been tugging on your heartstrings all along.
He's just been taught, and he had been. I mean, think about it, a 17-year-old. He was the 17-year-old conversation partner, right? He was giving me words, teaching me how to, in some ways, talk again. And so, yeah, that's how I came to Thurman, and everything else. Him as a theologian, Jesus and the Disinherited. Those were all after events for me.
when I think of Thurman, I think of just this beautiful integration of both the social activist side of him and then the mystic side of him. And I think I've read this right. He never called himself a mystic, but just this
Yeah.
beautiful blending of the two kind of spaces there. How has that played into your ongoing work, both again as a scholar, but then also as somebody who loves water, right? Like is deeply moved by water, right?
We move by water, right? I think Thurman can be very complex in this way. So one of the things for me that Thurman, in an earlier article that I wrote, I talked about how Thurman gave me permission to hold all the many different pieces of me. It was called my first article on thermeneutics in Greg Ellison's book, Anchored in the Current. And I talk about the life of the mind and the journey of the spirit and Thurman's clothesline imagery. And what that meditation and thinking I'm talking about there, Thurman allowed me to say it is okay for me to live in both my heart and my head at the same time. In fact, wholeness and to be anchored to see clearly requires living in both my head and my heart together. So I mean, his book, right, with his autobiography, With Head and Heart, he gave me permission to do that. So on one level, Thurman is very interiority focused. Everybody says this, it's about the inner person. And I'm like, yeah, until he says that inner person and that inner life should infect the external life, not just of you, but of others, of your siblings, of your neighborhood, of the world. And if your inner life isn't penetrating the external world in a way that gives permission and opportunity and space for other people to encounter their inner lives while they're encountering yours, then your inner life actually, and this is my language, would say it's bankrupt, because the goal is not for you to have this deep inner life that is not connected to everyone else. The goal is for your inner life to open up space for external connections, for justice, for I care about the dignity of others. I care that other people have access and freedom, that they can walk with peace and not fear in the world, right? Because we need those. We need those external justices so that we can do the internal work that's necessary. um that's the Thurman that I find myself most in conversation with and looking for. I don't know if I even answered your
Well,
question.
I just want to say amen to that. Like that's just yes, so good. Amen. Just absolutely. That's what I mean, and what has resonated so deeply with me, you just articulated so very well.
Yeah, you know what scares me about Thurman talk? I call it Thurman talk. I get scared by Thurman talk when people only want to talk about Thurman as a mystic, or they only want to talk about his interior life, and they don't recognize that one, that they're tied together. I go, you, Thurman is talking about the interiority because that matters for the external condition. And I don't think we always want to talk about the external condition in relationship to Thurman sometimes, because it's less about Thurman and more about the ways in which we want to be on the hook for doing something in the world beyond ourselves. And I'm like, but Thurman wants you to do something in the world beyond yourself, but with yourself.
Your full integrated self,
Your
right?
full
Yeah.
integrated self. That is always what he loves, quest language, just always on the quest for something. You're always on the journey. You're always on the pilgrimage water. You're always in the channel and in the flow of the currents. um, that full integration really is robust.
Oh, robust is a great way to say all the things, Shively. I think to talk about your varied work that you do, it's vast, and Thurman's work was vast. And I love when he says there is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. Will you talk to us
Yes.
about listening for the sound of the genuine in yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. That is such a deep meditation from Thurman. And one part of it for me is paying attention when in fact other people are pulling your strings, um, perhaps so masterfully that you have lost sight of the fact that those are other people's strings in the first place, right? And so I kind of heard Jenny, you asking me a little bit about what that looks like in my own story. Am I on the right track there? So for me, one of those ways is how I ended up being a biblical scholar in the first place. I ended up starting a first generation college student. And so I went to Fisk University, yay, Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, originally as a math and computer science major, had a full scholarship for that. I didn't have much of any sense of graduate school really. I was planning on, doing a 4-year degree, and then I was going to work um, an internship and go forward there. I was doing quite well in the math department, in fact, um, to the point that the math department, they were beginning to talk to me about going on to become a mathematician. And I was like, okay, I didn't have any particular yay or nay. It was just, this was the path I thought. I ended up taking a religion and philosophy course because I was also deeply in the church. I'm a PK. By that time, I was actually already named that I was supposed to be in the ministry too. So I took an introduction to the Bible and religion course along with taking a literature course that you have to take there. So in the literature course, I'm reading Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. Well, I'm also reading this introduction to the New Testament textbook with two professors who are women professors, one in religion and the one in literature, who are all both saying to me, "What are you doing in the math department? You're supposed to be in the religion and philosophy department. You're supposed to get a PhD and become a professor in religion and the Bible, and in Bible." I mean, they basically named this for me. And I said, I don't even know what that means. And so, why are you in math? Because math and science, tech is where everything's going. I can do it. I'm good at it. And that's just what you're supposed to do in college. And so they opened up a new space for me by giving me two books to read, the women's commentary and a womanist work by Renita Weems called Just a Sister Away. And I took those books over the weekend when I was supposed to be doing calculus, perhaps calculus 2 or something. And I read them like literally I read the women's commentary straight through that weekend and came and was sitting at their office on Monday morning crying because I knew that I was supposed to do this, right? And I didn't even know that was possible. And so when I hear Thurman's The Sound of the Genuine, it looks like that. I'm in the flow. I'm actually in good I actually have good intentions. I'm It's not bad for me to be in math and computer science. That's not a bad path, right? And then all of a sudden, this alternative path comes that reverberates through your head and your heart, and it's risky because it's not something you have ever seen modeled before. You don't even know how to do that path and go that way, and yet you know you must go that way. That's what that looks like to me. And cutting the strings of other people's expectations or dreams, even cutting the strings from your own sensibilities and going a strange road, right? A strange road. Um, is kind of how Thurman that reverberates with me. And I think I think we need more of that. I think more of us need to be willing to take the strange road in our journeys. And I think that's what Thurman was calling for.
So beautifully said. That meditation specifically has deep. We spent a lot of time with that
Me
at
too.
our gathering in October, and it was just such an important one. I also found my way to religious studies at a public university in Missouri State University, not knowing I could even study religion in the university. I mean, I had no idea. I was like pre-engineering. That's what I thought I was going to go do, and
Very similar. Like, that's an option.
well, the difference here is, though, I got a C in calculus my first semester and thought maybe this is the direction I should be heading. Maybe there's something else here for me. But so that's neither there. But I love this path though of it kind of just not I don't want to say it just emerges, right? But like there were guides there that helped point you, and you said it so beautifully, right? Like they almost made this way for you.
That's right.
And there's something to be said there about mentorship, about guides. We could even talk about like, I know that you have dear resonance with our friend of the pod, Bill Lamar, Reverend Bill Lamar, and just came out with his book on ancestors. And so even like the ancestral application to, and I would love to know what it was for a 20-year-old Shively versus what it has continued to be of like the guides from the ancestral realm too, as you've been on this journey.
Yeah, I think mentorship is so important. I love your language of guides, even more than mentors, that the spirit and the ancestors have a way of positioning guides and people seers, right? They may not even be, identifying as seers, but somehow they have a particular sight for your journey and your path. And the trick here, I think, and if I don't even know if I like the word trick, but I'm going to use it for a minute. The trick here, I think, isn't the question of whether there are seers around you, is whether you're going to listen to them or not, whether you're going to acknowledge them or not. And I think in a society that is more and more focused on such a hyper individualism, a hyper me, my self, sometimes you miss the gift of the seers around you that are positioning you on the strange road, right? Because that's not what you see, or that, you're actually going to listen to someone else, and I'm trying to listen to myself. So sometimes I think there's a danger with missing the guides in our life, because they don't always come in clear spaces like a professor. They don't always come in these sort of clear mentorship roles, and yet they're no less important and imperative in our lives. And I think that's where the ancestors come in too. The ancestors meet us, I think, in strange places, sometimes in strange faces. And Thurman has his own story about this. So his book, With Head and Heart, his autobiography, With Head and Heart, is dedicated to the man who paid for his trunk so that he could go to high school on the train. So his autobiography, the story of his life as he understood it, by the time it was published in 1979, is dedicated to this stranger whose name he does not have. He never seen him before. He never saw him after that. And all this man did was pay attention to the fact that he was crying, and asked what's wrong and remedied the problem. So here's the problem. Thurman is a teenager. He has there is no high school in Daytona, Florida at the time for African Americans to go to high school. So now he has to go to another city and stay with some family members to attend the high school. So the family, his mother and grandmother, they scraped together the money for him to get on the train to go from Daytona to, I think it's Jacksonville, but I don't quote me on that, for him to go to high school, to be the first in the neighborhood to go to high school. Away, he has to go away. He gets to the train station only to find out that the conductor there says he doesn't have the right trunk. It doesn't have a tag or something on it. And so now it has to be checked. And that's a whole additional bill. He has no hope of having that money. This was the best trunk he could bring. And this man walks up to him, this stranger in overalls, and says to him, "Boy, why are you crying?" And Thurman tells him that he can't get his trunk on the train. He can't afford it. And the man pulls out a money pouch and pays for his ticket. And his response to him, this is almost exactly how Thurman describes it in his book, is that if you try to get out of this town, and probably some bleep bleeps there, I'll do anything to help somebody get out of this this horrible town. He pays it and walks away. No name, no anything, right? The signature is Thurman gets on the train and becomes Thurman, right? Those are guide. That's a guide, right? And how many of us do we even have those moments, and that moment actually happened for us and we missed it, we forgot, we missed it, we missed that person who said that interrupted something that was trying to stop our path, right?
Geez, I love all of that, because I think I'm going to speak for myself instead of everyone else, but I want my guides to be professors and pastors and people that I've known for a long time. I want all of these things to be neat and tidy. I want a path that doesn't always feel so strange, and that closes you off to the stranger, that closes you off to someone that you're only going to see one time and you're not going to have any other interaction with. Will you talk to us about the open-heartedness of looking at everyone as a potential guide and what that requires of us?
The first thing I would say it requires of us is courage. So people can talk about tenderness and humility. And I'm like, yeah, actually, I think it requires courage to be open enough to the stranger. And they're strange to you for whatever reason, right? And to see them as a possible guide, or quite frankly, just to see them as a sibling in humanity, like we are all siblings together, in this world and in existence. I think especially now, it is a dangerous thing for many of us these days to open ourselves to strangers. There's so much toxicity, there's so much anger and despair, there's so many critiques, there's so many silos and ways in which we've created, we're divided from each other, and our world seems to be breathing that division these days. It feels even more risky, and yet that to me is that's the necessary feature, that's the necessary element to do the courageous thing and create, cultivate, at least be curious about whether you and someone else can have something in common with each other. You actually have something in common with each other.
Yeah, I feel like courage is such a good word.
Mm-hmm.
And feels like such a necessary word, given like you were saying, the world that we're in right now. And I think it takes me back to, you mentioned Greg Ellison earlier, right? Like courageous conversations, right? And just so much of what takes place in the work he has done through that. And I know not just him, there's a whole team of people doing work around courageous conversations and
fearless dialogue.
Oh, it's fearless dialogues. There we go. That's what it is. Yeah, thank you.
He's another one. Like I said, Phil, we run in very similar circles. He's another great friend, my brother, in the space. And we always talk about the cost of this fearlessness. What does it mean to enter into conversations with people with the intention of better seeing each other's humanity, better seeing each other's similarities, and appreciating and valuing the ways we are different, right? So we don't have to flatten difference. We can see it as the gift that it is. Yeah, I think we both on this. He uses language of fearlessness, and I really just like to talk about it at the level of courage and bravery, to seek out these kinds of relationships and connections.
Yeah, I think it's so important where we are currently, and it's just not easy, right? Like we're in this highly polarized world that we're in right now. It's just not easy.
That's right.
Okay, I gotta know, getting to the New Testament here and like becoming a New Testament scholar. And Peter.
Yes.
Why Peter?
I'm still asking myself that question. Not playing.
Maybe that was another guide that just kept tugging on those strings too. That you're like, what's happening here? Yeah.
So I had every intention on becoming a Luke Acts scholar and working with the Gospels. That was my focus all the way up until right before it was time to start writing the dissertation. And a couple of things happened. I really got interested in the way in which the language or the experiences of dispersion and diaspora were captured in the Torah first, looking at places like the book of Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah. And then I was really interested in how these diaspora dispersion experiences were being captured in early Christianity. And I'm, like I said, I'm a Fiskite. So I originally come from Fisk University, Nashville, Tennessee. So the school of W.E.B. Du Bois. So, I mean, like almost from day one, you land on Fisk and you're reading Du Bois. Souls of Black Folk, double consciousness. I think it is in all Fiskites' DNA that we have some double consciousness thinking and Du Bois in us. And so it started becoming very striking to me that that aspect of thinking about what it means to be a scattered people, a dispersed people, a diaspora people, the sense of double consciousness and double identities, the idea that there's not a singular experience of diaspora was not something that had been fully articulated in the biblical text and in early Christianity in those terms. And I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about this in relationship to the book of Acts, right? And I was clear, this is going to be an Acts project. I'm going to be a Luke Acts scholar. And my advisors and committee members at the time invited me to read the entire New Testament and to see where I was going to land, where in fact the language was located. The language for being a stranger, the language of dispersion, the language of multiple experiences was in the book of Acts, but it was strongly in the book of First Peter. Like all of the language right there in the first verses of First Peter, in fact. And you even have naming land for those the strangers and those of the elect who are located in Asia and Bithynia and Pontus, those of the dispersion, right there at the beginning. And they said, what about First Peter? And I said, absolutely not.
Did you not hear me? I said Acts. We're going to stick with Acts.
I said Acts. Absolutely not. I'm not doing First Peter. It has everything you have there. And I'm also an African-American woman, biblical scholar. It also has the household codes there, right? So slaves, obey your masters, be they good or bad. Wives, submit to your husband in silence, right? I mean, I was like, it has all the other stuff there that I do not like. That is a problem. And all the more reason for you to work in First Peter and to work with Peter. And that kind of became, so I did the thing that I do not coach people to do, which is I got through my exams, I got through my coursework, and then right at my dissertation, I changed my location into First Peter and the Catholic letters doing this work. So my first book came out of that. So Strangers to Family, First Peter's Inventions of God's Household came out of that. And just kind of, yeah, I'm still marveling that I do First Peter, and then my second book is on Second Peter. So it's interpreting Second Peter through African American women's moral writings. And then I worked on, book projects for the New Testament. So I've been able to play outside of the Petrine text, but yeah.
Petrine. I kept trying to think of what it was before we started recording. I was telling Jenny, I was like, I know John is Johanna, and it's in Petrine. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah. So it's been fun. But I want to say that it's like you said, an aspect of what I do. So I started there, but I haven't stayed there. So I have quite a few articles that engages in sort of in the Gospels themselves. So I did a whole article on one of my first earlier articles on Asada Shakur and rereading the narrative, the flight narrative in Egypt, in Matthew as a fugitive narrative. So I play in a lot of ways. I've reread Mark 15 and um, looking at Mary Magdalene's view of crucifixion in conversation with Ida B. Wells' view of the Lynch Chronicles. So that's sort of some of the work I've done playing there. And then I'm always engaging folks like Howard Thurman, um, Anna Julia Cooper, Maria Stewart, all these other African American thinkers, and I would call them interpreters of the biblical text. So they are interpreting the biblical language and imagery too, and infusing meaning and significance into it. And I think that there's a whole group of biblical scholars that we have missed because they weren't necessarily in the formal ivory tower of the academy, but are very, very relevant to how we are interpreting the Bible today in ways that engage each other's humanity. Whether you're Christian or not, whether you're Jewish or not, whether you're Muslim or not, whether you're Hindu or not, whether you identify as a spiritual person, not a religious person, atheist, agnostic, it doesn't matter. I think that these particular invisible biblical interpreters are teaching us something about what does it mean to engage in sacred text in a way that affirms the dignity of God's creation rather than using the text to extract dignity from God's creation. Yeah.
Will you talk to us about affirming the dignity of Christ's creation through the text? Because I just see a lot of people using it to extract the dignity of Christ's creation currently.
Yeah. So it's funny. I literally just preached yesterday at a congregation here in Boston. Um, um, I don't know. Should I say the name of the congregation or not? So I don't think
Sure.
they would
Yeah.
care. So I just preached yesterday at Union Combined Parish UMC as a part of their Lent and Women's Month, and so their theme is setting us free, and they lined up a whole series of women preachers and scholars to come in, and so yesterday was my day, a Sunday, to do that. And you know what? So here's the funny part. I told them this. I preached a text that I said I would never preach. I was like, not ever. Like, I will never deal with this text. There's so many problems with it. And listening to those guides, and then the spirit, that interior self, Wednesday comes along, and they're like, what is your title or what is your text? And I'm like, I refuse to preach that text. I'm not doing it. And I did. So the text is Acts 16. So Acts 16, people typically know this is when Paul is we've had the big Jerusalem Council in Acts 15, and now we finally get on the journey with Paul, and Paul is going to Philippi, and he's going to meet Lydia, who is this beautiful entrepreneur of purple dyes and material, and people associate her as the earliest church house basically in Philippi. So she has a founding role in the development of early Christianity. Well, that is not who I paid attention to. Who I paid attention to was the enslaved girl, as many of our modern translations deal with, who fundamentally ended up getting on Paul's nerves. She she was an enslaved girl who had the gift of divination and fortune telling, and Paul and Silas and Timothy and whoever else was with him, they were going to the place of prayer, probably where Lydia is the lead prayer. She's the leader of this woman's prayer group. And this enslaved girl begins following them and saying, these are slaves of God, the Most High God, slaves of the Most High God. And the text says that Paul was annoyed deeply annoyed, very irritated. In some modern day vernaculars, you might say she was getting on his last nerve. And he cast her out. And then all the ruckus happens because this slave girl's owners are mad because she is their stream of income, that they get money from her gift. She doesn't get money from her gift, they get money from her gift. And now the text switches to the predicament that Paul and Silas are in, having healed this woman, set this woman free, and with her owners. And so the question becomes, how free is she really? And the issue is she's actually not free. She's even more exposed and vulnerable now than she was before, because the text says nothing about them checking to see how she was doing, offering her space to recover or to recalibrate. The text circles back to Lydia. Even at the end of the chapter, she like disappears from the text as if she was incidental, and she was just that, an annoyance in Paul's story. But the Bible can't just be about Paul's story. She's a part of that story too. And so this is an instance where I ended up talking about what happens when we stop paying attention to her. And for me, the biblical text and its treatment of this story is less about who Paul is and who God is and what we do. Like what makes it living and revelatory is how this story is a mirror to how easily we think we solve one little problem of someone and without recognizing the systemic structure that they are actually in. And then we go on with our story and they are forgotten because, we gave them some canned goods for Thanksgiving. So at least they can have some food for their Thanksgiving. Forget that they are caught in a system that is not going to care if they have anything to eat for New Year's or, Lord forbid, in March, right? So for me, that's how we read the text and what we allow the text to show us is important in understanding if the text is being used to affirm dignity or if it's being used in a way that it extracts it from people or it makes people invisible. And that text tells us more about ourselves than about Paul and this woman and even God, I think. I have no idea, Jenny. Did I get to your question? Because I disappear into doing some of that interpretive work.
Well, yeah. So first of all, shout out Reverend J, right? Love Reverend J.
Hey, Reverend J is one of those people who could call me for anything.
The Union there, yeah, Union. And then Reverend Kyle actually is a North Texas guy here. I knew him back in the day, so just what a gift. We got to spend time with him when I was in Boston too. Just a really cool spot. If you're in Boston, go check him out. Yeah, so good.
Union is great. Go check out that space.
And I just want to hope that it's a model for the future of the church. I think there's such a, that's a whole other podcast episode, but I just think they're doing such great work.
Yeah, I think, and at this intersection that we're talking about, what does it mean to slow down our congregations, to slow down our worship lives and spiritual lives, and make sure that we're not solving a small problem and missing the systemic and larger problem.
Which is exactly where I was going to, you named it without, we've been talking in some of the kind of justice ministry spaces that I'm working in here in North Texas around this idea of kind of a move from mercy to justice, right? It's not that we're going to stop giving out food at Thanksgiving, right? We're going to continue doing those things and having the food pantries and having the shelters that are, housing people at nighttime, especially when it's cold, all these kind of things. We're not going to stop those. But what is the invitation then to move from just the mercy aspect of things to these larger issues of justice?
That's right.
I think what you just did, interpreting Acts 16 that way, is such a beautiful invitation to that. But I would love to know, again, pulling back in some of these threads of Thurman and these other aspects of this, what are ways that you're seeing or being invited to, or maybe inviting our audience to understand this move from mercy to more of an aspect of justice?
Yeah, and this is where I think the courage is important, because if we even go back to the text, what I'm fundamentally inviting us to do is to interrupt the certainty we have that the text has solved all the problems in the first place. The so the certainty is the journey we're supposed to be taking in this text is with Paul, right? Whereas Thurman's ways of interpreting the text is actually to be suspicious of the dominant character in the story, and to really, I would think Thurman would want to follow the trail of the unnamed, and that was the other part of um, my sermon was, she's not only is she an enslaved girl, she's unnamed by the gospel writer of Luke, who is really good at naming people.
Of all the people, come on,
All the
especially women.
Especially women, people who are on the sidelines. Luke loves giving people their names, right? And this is like a huge real estate. So so now I'm going to do a little bit of Bible scholar geek out on you. Sorry, just
come on, I'm here for it.
But the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts are considered two volumes of a larger work. Like together, the Gospel of Luke and Book of Acts function as foundational origin story of early Christianity. And the gospel writer, who we call Luke, all scholars recognize he wrote it for that purpose. The life and death and resurrection of Jesus, and then the birth of the church. And these go together. And yes, they get divided by the Gospel of John. And we could talk about that later in terms of how the Gospels like to travel together. But ultimately, when you put the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts together, do you know it takes up about 25% of the Greek real estate of the New Testament? I mean, that's a huge part of the pie. So a huge part of the New Testament pie, just in sheer word count in the Greek, not the English, is Luke Acts, is this gospel writer of Luke. And one of his distinguishing features is the power of naming the least of these, right? The way in which he gives names and locations and agency and presence and acknowledgement to groups and people that we don't hear or see as clearly in the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, John, or even if we look at the letters themselves. And so you come here and all of a sudden we have no name. I mean, it's infraction on top of infraction. And I think Thurman would say, let's sit with this unnamed enslaved girl and wonder, right? What's her circumstances? What are her circumstances improved after this act, or uh are her circumstances worse, right? Thurman slows us down in his interpretive art to become curious about the unnamed, right? And I don't think we do enough of that, either when we're reading the biblical text, but in our own lives. I am curious what happens after that family that comes for Thanksgiving for the food pantry today. What's going to happen 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now for them? I'm concerned about spaces where, with the growing unemployment, what does it mean that at the top of the list of growing unemployment right now are Black women? And when you talk about Black women, you're talking about families, right? You're not talking about one person. You're talking about households. So you're not just talking about nuclear households. Those are ripple effects, because studies show that typically Black women and women of color, in their incomes, they're not just supporting their own households, they're supporting their elderly parents here. They're helping to take care of family there, right? And so you're talking about multiple households that are impacted by some of the struggles, the economic inequities that are increasing in our community. So we have to get curious beyond the individual and start thinking down the line about the ripple effects of these connections, and curious and bothered by them. right? Like unsettled, right? I think that that's a Thurman move, in fact.
Oh my
Thank you.
gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Curious and unsettled is a good way to roll right now, I think, for sure. Shively, we could talk to you until
Yeah.
the end of time and never run out of questions, and it would be so great. It would be so great.
So
But
many more avenues here. We didn't even talk about dreams. We have to talk about this next time. We got to talk about this next time.
I'm just talking about dreams and abilities.
we got a pile of things. But will you tell us about your book that's about to come out in August and where folks can pre-order it and all the best things? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so if you didn't know, Thurman is at the top of my conversation space these days. My next book that's coming out is literally called Reading Howard Thurman, His Practices of Interpretation Through Womanist Eyes. This book really is about what it means to slow down and recognize we are all always already interpreting. That interpretation is not something you learn when you go to seminary. It's not something that you have to learn. I mean, interpretation, it permeates the law, legal spaces. It permeates how the doctors interpret your symptoms. And interpretation is part of being human. And Thurman leaves a model for us of what it means to be attentive to our work as interpreters in the world. What it means, and what do you mean by interpreters? I mean, literally asking, what does this mean? Right? And the answer isn't abstract, it's concrete. The answer isn't without form, it has form. So for Thurman to answer what does something mean is to feel the trees and the water and the island and the roots, is to grab for the rain and the door and the latches. I mean, Thurman literally grabs for things and narrates them as a way to help us understand anything, understand the Bible, understand what it means to live our life as a pilgrimage, as a quest, what it means for us to understand ourselves as siblings to one another. It is a way of talking about the interpretive life and being an interpreter that I don't think you hear enough in seminaries, in graduate school, in religious studies and philosophy, but it is a way of talking about interpretation that we need to do now. And so the book really is a conversation between Thurman, myself, and all of these different texts, right? From we're talking to the Bible, then we're talking to Gandhi, then we're going into the spirituals. A couple of my favorite chapters in there, just to give you a highlight. My last chapter is called Night Talking. Night Talking. So I'm not going to tell you what that is, but Night Talking. And then my other favorite chapter is called parabling. So I turn parables into a verb. It's an action that we do. And Thurman leaves that as a model. So yeah, that book comes out mid-August, I think August 12th, but it's on pre-order with Amazon right now. I'm published by Fortress Press, and I am excited about it. I'm really excited about it.
I just want to say, when we were again together in October, or whatever it was, the fall, I think it was October, you told us interpretation is a threshold between awakening and numbness.
Yeah, that's the opening line of the book. That's literally the first line of the book.
Well, I think that's a perfect teaser for everybody. Like, come back later whenever we have Shively back. Go order the book now. But like, what a beautiful statement. The threshold between awakening and numbness.
Yeah. I want us in this moment. I think Thurman is the person for us to be looking at and listening to, because I think we really have to not just wake up, but we really have to be emboldened in our wakefulness as interpreters. And so I really feel deeply that Thurman has left a pattern and a model for us that we can live into, that we should live into now. So thank you all.
Oh, thank you, Shively.
are there other places that people can find your work beyond just the books on, I know, Amazon and such, Fortress Press and such?
Yes, absolutely. So if you go to my website, shivelysmith.com, the place where you can really see some of my interpretive work with images and the work that I'm doing there will be images. So www.imagesofinterpretation.com. So shivelysmith.com or imagesofinterpretation.com. Those are the spaces where you can see me doing my work. The fun part is I have galleries there of Thurman's images and his interpretive work. I have galleries there of 19th century African American women writers and how they were interpreting passages from the lectionary. A lot of that's been supported by the Calvin Institute, so I'm so grateful to them for their support in my work. Yeah, that's me. And please sign up for my newsletter because that's how you can get all the updates. You get to know first where I am and what I'm doing.
Oh, that's wonderful. We thank you so much for your time today, Shively, and may these words carry you forward. May you be curious and unsettled. May you interpret. May you be open to the guides, however and whenever and wherever they come. Amen.
Amen and Ashe. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Radical Sacred community.
In these uncertain times, may you cling to hope and deep connection, and may you work towards living in the spirit of reciprocity with all beings.
Our lovely intro and outro music is Beach Song by the band Saren.
And it's just the two of us here at Radical Sacred, so please help us out by sharing with your friends, rating and reviewing us. Find more of our work on Substack and Instagram.
Remember, you are on sacred ground. Stay rooted.